Microsoft are continually updating their development tools, and the most recent incarnation of Visual Studio is Visual Studio 2019. Generally speaking, most updates are a mixture of cosmetics and enhanced tools. However, for my training courses, the differences will go largely unnoticed. In fact, I often speak to students who use a range of versions right back to Visual Studio 2008. Companies themselves rarely jump on board with new versions straight away. They'll have projects built in earlier versions or developers who just don't have time to transition. Therefore, when wondering which version you should be using, the answer is largely, it doesn't really matter. That said, people will of course start to migrate over to the latest version over time, but luckily the only real change you need to be worried about is the Create Project screen. This is the first time in over 10 years that Microsoft have actually changed this part of the process, so it's worth a quick run through what's different. My courses are all recorded using Visual Studio 2017, and so other than this Create Project screen, you won't actually see any differences. So when you launch 2019, you'll now get this new window coming up, and the first thing we usually do is create either a new project or a new solution. So the first thing we'll want is to click this Create New Project. As you can see, on the old version you used to have all your templates grouped down the left hand side. Now all the grouping happens along the top here. So for example, we can go in and select which language we want to use. We can select the platform, so for example if we're writing for Windows or Xbox, Azure and so on. Or we can have project types, again cloud, console, so on and so forth. So the first thing we normally do, or in my course that I normally do, is create an empty solution. So for that we'd go into the project type and other. Again, this is pretty much very similar to what we do in the old version, and we see here we've got the blank solution, so we simply click that and next, and again we just go through the normal process of giving it a name and where to create it. From there, the next things we would normally do is go and start to add projects to the solution. Again, we get the new project come up, and the main ones that I normally use are either class libraries or web applications. Now we need to be careful because obviously a lot of defaults now are using .NET Core or .NET Standard. Again, it doesn't really matter what you're using, but as I tend to focus more on .NET 4.7, we just need to make sure we use the original framework versions. So for example, if we're creating a website, so we would say project and web. By default, the top one is ASP.NET Core Web Application, but actually in a lot of my courses I want this ASP.NET Web Application .NET Framework, and it's this that you need to look for when you're writing applications that need to be backwardsly compatible. So again we'll click next, again we'll give it a name, and again just as before we select the templates that we'll do. Again it's slightly different but all the information looks pretty much the same, so we'll want either MVC or Web API depending on which course you're taking, and then you click create, and that will go ahead and create the project as normal. The other common project we normally create is a library project. Again, we'll go to add new project. So to find the library project, again we go to project type, and we actually have library project type there. And again it comes up with the different versions that we can use. And again for most of mine we will usually want the .NET framework, but again depending on which course you're taking we might be using the .NET Core or the .NET Standard. Either way, select the one we want, ensuring you've got the correct framework, click next, again give it a name, and then click create. Once all that's done, you will find the rest of what we use the same as normal, so when you're managing NuGet packages or using any of the IntelliSense tools, they'll all look exactly the same.